moving on. Now, so let's talk about the teaching and the field of research that the field of research and teaching that you have entered into when talking about teaching and learning in higher education. So the field you will study has several different names. The program focuses on what is known as then teaching and learning in higher education. In Swedish, we often use the word högskolepedagogik, which directly translates to higher education pedagogy. However, it can be argued that I will argue this, that there is a point in talking about teaching and learning in higher education than higher education pedagogy. And this is also which is the preferred use that we have at the Center for Teaching and Learning, talking about teaching and learning in higher education. And the reason why we not necessarily want to talk about higher education pedagogy is because our emphasis is on adult learning, or andragogy, which is also called. So andragogy is sometimes described as a theory in itself. Others, however, argue that it should rather be understood as an accumulation of different theories that is used to understand how adults learn. So as a field of knowledge, it is thus differs from pedagogy, which some argue mainly concerns the learning of children and adolescents. Therefore, there is a point in talking about teaching and learning in higher education instead of higher education pedagogy, because we thereby make it clear on a conceptual level that we are interested in forms of learning that affects adults, thus andragogy, instead of children and adolescents, which we usually call pedagogy. This is actually then it's a trivial point, but and you will probably read about. I actually looked at one of our web pages and it said higher education pedagogy, but it was an old page. We should update it. But so you will probably read and you will probably hear some of us say higher education pedagogy now and again during the course of the program. But this point is nevertheless important to emphasize, because we need to understand that the emphasis in the master's programs it deals exclusively with higher education and adult learning. While there may be reasons to occasionally highlight education at other levels as well, this program will focus on developing your knowledge, teaching and learning in higher education, as well as contributing to your development as higher education teachers in your respective subject areas. The focus will thus be on how to become a better teacher at university or equivalent level of education. Therefore, for example, you will notice that the examination assignments, literature, and discussions will mainly focus on higher education and adult learning. Kelly has a question.
Thank you. I just had like a kind of specific question about this. When you say adult learning, I mean, are we talking about legal age, voting age, when you're done with high school or gymnasium and you enter higher ed and then you're 18 and you're an adult? Or are you meaning adults returning to education, or older people such as myself who are adults as students again?
Yeah.
Or both?
So I think that all of the above. So from after secondary education, gymnasium forward. But however, usually we will be. It's this is one of my favorite questions. What does it mean to be an adult? Even so, what it means to be a grown up, and these kinds of questions also become relevant when talking about adult education. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, we have a whole program to discuss these kinds of things, but the basic idea is that we will mostly be discussing students who are entering a university or higher education level. That means college and universities. but also other forms of other institutions for higher education. We can talk about, in Sweden we have komvux, what is called,
A community college or
thank you. Yes, thank you. These kinds of things also. So we will touch upon teaching in the teaching and learning of adults, basically. And if you want to put an age on it, so from age of, let's say, 20 upwards, all the way to what the limit of how old you can get. Yeah, basically.
Thank you, Fredrik.
So good question. I will move on then. So because we are dealing with higher education and adult learning, this is also one of the reasons why when you applied that we wanted you to explain if you have experience teaching at a higher education level. So or in within a similar or in on a similar level. So this education, this program will be research based, which means, among other things, that we will take part in relevant research in connection with teaching and learning in higher education. But we will also rely on the experience of teaching in higher education. As you will notice during the program, we will invite you to discuss based on your experiences of teaching in higher education, or perhaps being a student in higher education. So the idea here is that you all have extensive knowledge that we think you should share with each other. In this way, we can learn from each other together then and develop in this field of knowledge. So related to this, I would like to add that there is a bit of a myth surrounding the bad university teacher. You know, these teachers that preferably should stick to research and never be allowed into a lecture hall because of his or her lack of ability to explain various phenomena understandably and with engagement. Sure, many of us certainly have experiences with these kinds of teachers, but I think it's usually a question of anecdotal evidence of a condition that isn't really true. Because my experience of working at universities in Sweden and in Finland, and I realize that this might be different. It might be different in other places in the world, but anyway, my experience is. So somebody has the sound on. I'll turn off the mics. So yep. If does somebody have a question? If somebody has a question, I'll ask you to uh, raise your hand. That's the only way I can see if you have a question. Okay. So, talking about my experience then with teaching, with working at universities in Sweden and Finland, my experience is that teachers in higher education are generally very good teachers. Sure, they may have challenges that they have maybe trying to solve. That is one of the reasons why departments like the Center for Teaching and Learning, where I work, exists. It's to assist with the work of assist the teachers in their work in some way. Teach them to become even better teachers on these kinds of things. What they tend to lack, however, even though they're quite competent, are forums where they have a chance to share their experiences of teaching in higher education, as well as to take part in the experiences of others. So this is a problematic because access to forums where people can collaborate by sharing their experiences is one of the best ways in which we can develop as teachers in higher education. I will therefore assume that all of you are already quite competent teachers in higher education and that you have a lot to share. So this program will thus be an opportunity for you to be part of a forum where you will have a chance to share everything you know, as well as to learn from the experiences of others within the program.